Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Deep in Bigfoot territory. Episode 29, The Strange Disappearance of Jordan Grier. This is a Squatch Mafia documentary. Welcome to this episode of Bigfoot territory. Today we are going to venture into the deep forests of northern Minnesota and Ontario and take a closer look at one of the most fascinating cases of missing persons related to Bigfoot in recent years. We are also going to examine Bigfoot activity in Minnesota in general, especially in its northern parts and in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. And we will be looking at various Bigfoot encounter videos from Minnesota. The disappearance and tragic death of Jordan Grier in October 2018 in the remote Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness of northern Minnesota has sparked controversy among the public, hunters, outdoorsmen, and the Bigfoot community alike. To this day, it remains an unsolved mystery. We are going to take a deep dive into the story of his disappearance and explore various hotspots of Bigfoot activity in Minnesota, particularly in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness, often referred to simply as the BWCA, a rough and extremely remote region in the borderlands of northern Minnesota and Canada. The rugged landscape of the BWCA is characterized by deep forests, over 1,100 lakes, and hundreds of miles of rivers and streams. The BWCA is a massive area of over 1 million acres along the US-Canadian border, accessible only by canoe. The area is known for its vast solitude and remoteness. 80% of the BWCA is covered in dense forest, while 20% consists of lakes and rivers. The BWCA extends along 150 miles, or 240 kilometers, of the Canadian border in the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. The combined region of the BWCA, the Superior National Forest, the Voyageurs National Park, and Ontario's Quetico Provincial Parks make up a large area of contiguous wilderness, lakes, and forests, called the Boundary Waters. Lake Superior lies to the south and east of the Boundary Waters. Wildlife in the BWCA includes deer, moose, beavers, timber wolves, and black bears. The region has been home to various native tribes for thousands of years. The North Country was inhabited by the Paleo-Indian culture around 8000 BC. A few artifacts from that era and the subsequent Archaic period, around 6,000 years ago, have been found in the BWCA. Artifacts from the later woodland Indian cultures have also been discovered there. The area was later sparsely populated by the Sioux. Later the Ojibwe, part of the Algonquian-speaking groups of Canada, arrived and the Sioux migrated westward. The region then became part of the Ojibwe homeland. Within the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, hundreds of prehistoric pictographs and petroglyphs can be found on rock ledges and cliffs. The Hegman Lake pictograph, located on a large overlooking rock wall on North Hegman Lake, is believed to have been created by the Ojibwe. In 1688, French explorer Jacques de Noyon became the first European known to have traveled through the BWCA area. Later, during the 1730s, the region was known for the trade of beaver pelts. By the end of the 18th century, the fur trade had been organized into groups of canoe-paddling voyageurs, working for the competing Northwest and Hudson's Bay companies, with a Northwest Company fort located at the Grand Portage on Lake Superior. But in the 1820s, the center of the fur trade moved further north, to the posts around Hudson Bay. The BWCA remained largely undeveloped until gold and silver were found in the surrounding area during the 1870s. Logging in the area began around the same time to supply lumber to the mining industries, with production peaking in the late 1910s and gradually trailing off during the 1920s and 30s. Today, there are no full-time residents in the BWCA anymore since the 1980s. As mentioned earlier, the wilderness around Lake Superior has been home to various native tribes for thousands of years, starting with Paleo-Indian cultures around 8000 BC. The area was later populated by the Ojibwe, a branch of the Algonquian-speaking First Nations. In Canada, they mainly live from western Quebec to Manitoba. The oral tradition of these native groups includes tales of eerie and dangerous beings, living in the remote wastelands and forests of the region since prehistoric times. The pictographs and petroglyphs of Sasquatch-like figures in the Boundary Waters canoe area are some of the most fascinating of their kind in the United States. Some of them are surely as baffling as the more famous pictographs of painted rock in California. The Algonquin groups living around Lake Superior know tales of various hostile beings that populate the forests and the wilderness of the region. Some are creatures of flesh and blood, while others resemble demonic entities. The two most well-known beings from the tales of the First Nations are the Sasquatch and the Wendigo. The Algonquin believe that the Wendigo is a malevolent spirit, sometimes depicted as a creature with human-like characteristics, driven by a desire to eat humans and a propensity to commit murder. In some stories, the Wendigo is described as a giant humanoid whose approach is signaled by a foul stench or a sudden, unseasonable chill. These giants, much larger than humans, are never satisfied after killing and consuming one person and are constantly searching for new victims. The natives believe that the Wendigo is a semi-demonic entity, sometimes described as a flesh and blood being, while in other stories, it resembles immaterial and destructive forces of nature. The Wendigo is said to mostly attack its victims from the air or from above, leaving behind only their empty shoes. While the Wendigo is often described as a demonic or ghostly man-eater, the Sasquatch of the Algonquin mythology of Minnesota and Ontario is a flesh and blood being, often described as a kind of guardian of the forests. While the natives of the region believe that the Sasquatch is not as malicious and hostile as the Wendigo, they believe that these beings are still to be feared and respected. The Algonquin believe that the Sasquatch are extremely territorial and kill hunters and wanderers who accidentally enter their territory. Some supernatural powers, like the ability to disappear, are also attributed to the Sasquatch. Good reads on Bigfoot in Minnesota are The Sasquatch in Minnesota and Sasquatch Central, both written by Mike Quast, and also the book The Algonquin Bigfoot, authored by Jay Allen. The history of Bigfoot activity in the Boundary Waters canoe area and northern Minnesota, as documented by Westerners, is long and shocking, with numerous known hotspots dating back to the 19th century. The BFRO website alone lists nearly 80 Bigfoot encounters in Minnesota from the early 1970s until 2024. More than 20 reported encounters are documented just for St. Louis County, where the BCWA is located, and where Jordan Grier disappeared in 2018. The stories and descriptions of Bigfoot from the BWCA often sound similar. In many cases, creatures are seen on the shores of rivers and streams, and various photos and videos exist. In rare cases, canoers and fishermen report that stones and rocks were thrown at them. Sometimes the creatures allegedly even try to attack boats and canoes if they are too close to the shoreline. Another hotspot of Bigfoot activity in northern Minnesota is a car drive of 2 hours south of the BWCA, down US Route 2 or Minnesota State Route 6 in Cass County, around the small town of Reamer in the Chippewa National Forest. The history of Bigfoot activity in the region dates back to the late 1800s. Many locals know stories about the Sasquatch, often passed down within families. Sasquatch tracks, and in some rare cases even photos, continue to emerge from the Chippewa National Forest. Today, the town of Reamer hosts an annual Sasquatch festival called Bigfoot Days. So, the history of Sasquatch in northern Minnesota, especially in the Boundary Waters canoe area, as well as in Ontario, is long, likely much longer than most people realize. In October 2018, a young man who lived as an off-grid camper ventured into the remote landscape of the Boundary Waters canoe area to spend the winter in the forests of northern Minnesota. The man was 29-year-old Jordan Grier, a New Mexico-born outdoorsman who had already spent many months alone in the wilderness of North America. Grier, who led a non-conventional lifestyle and had spent the previous decade living in the woods of Kentucky and upstate New York, was accustomed to surviving in the wild for weeks at a time. In the first days of October 2018, Grier had set up his campsite overlooking a seasonal beaver slough in the northeast of the BWCA, near the old Sioux Hustler Trail, close to the Canadian border. He left the area at least once to drive to the nearest store and purchase supplies, based on a receipt from a store in the nearby town of Ely, found in his vehicle and dated October 9th. After that, nothing more was heard or seen from Jordan Grier. By mid-October, a truck was reported to local authorities after it had remained parked near a private gate off the Sioux Hustler Trail for several days without being moved. Police identified the truck as belonging to Jordan Grier and contacted his family in New Mexico, learning that he was in the area and had planned to spend the winter in the BWCA. Authorities attempted to locate him, but found no sign of Grier or his camp in the area. By the end of October, the onset of winter in northern Minnesota made it impossible for the authorities to continue the search. For 6 months, no additional attempts could be made to locate the missing man. In April 2019, Conservation Officer Sean Williams, from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources in Ely, stumbled upon a chilling discovery in the Boundary Waters. Williams located an abandoned camp off the Sioux Hustler Trail, with the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office report describing a large amount of blood inside a hammock and a sleeping bag. Beyond the blood-stained hammock and sleeping bag, other strange circumstances hinted at something deeply disturbing having taken place at the remote campsite. Officer Williams later recalled, "It's in a super remote place. If you were looking for a spot to avoid contact with people, he really did find it. We were kind of just taking it in, a visual inventory. We noticed a large amount of blood everywhere." The hammock was slung under a green tarp that hung over a guy wire. A 9mm Beretta pistol was found inside the hammock, along with 2 loaded magazines. Blood splatter covered the walls of the tarp. Despite the initial search of the campsite, there was no sign of Grier. However, the effort was hindered by 2 to 4 feet of snow covering the area. Williams and his team decided to wait for the snow to melt and to return later. It took nearly another month for the snow to melt, and before conditions allowed the men to continue the search. A team of 20 to 30 people along with cadaver dogs searched the area for days. 10 bones were found, including a possible femur and a possible forearm. A shredded jacket and other torn bits of clothing were also found at the campsite. 2 more bones were discovered days later further from the site by cadaver dogs. The skull of Jordan Grier was never found. Whatever happened to Jordan Grier occurred soon after he arrived in the area in October 2018. The research team believed he had spent only one night at his final campsite. Evidence suggested he had burned a single fire and prepared just one meal, leading to the suspicion that he had died on his first night in his camp. Grier's cell phone was recovered at the campsite and later analyzed. The last messages sent and received were on October 9, 2018. A group text message to the family stated how much grain and beans he had bought, and that he was prepared for a long winter. The last image on the phone was the same image he had sent to his family on October 8th, showing the surrounding nature of his campsite. There was nothing on the phone that could help explain how Grier had died. Suicide was ruled out because the gun hadn't been used, and Grier's cell phone didn't include anything that indicated he was suffering from depression or contemplating self-harm. Wolf prints and scat were found at the campsite, but if a wolf attack was involved, it was more than likely post-mortem. The key piece of evidence is that most of the blood was found inside the hammock. In addition, the tarp and hammock were largely intact, making a wolf attack highly unlikely, let alone an attack by an entire pack. Wolves are typically very messy with their kills, and if this had been a wolf attack, the evidence would have been unmistakable. The tent and hammock would likely have been torn to shreds. Since there were no rips or tears in the hammock or tarp, it was unlikely a pack of wolves attacked Grier while he was in the hammock. A wolf kill features greater signs of a struggle, and the resulting mess to have been even more pronounced. If wolves make a kill, the scene where the blood and remains are is a huge scene of disturbance. The blood smears across a large area. The other question is, why didn't Jordan reach for the Beretta in his hammock if wolves had attacked? Additionally, wolf attacks on humans are extremely rare. Only 2 confirmed attacks have been recorded in Minnesota in the last 100 years. Across the entire North American continent, only 2 wolf attacks have occurred in the past 20 years, causing the deaths of 22-year-old Kenton Carnegie in Saskatchewan in 2005 and of Candace Berner in Alaska in 2010. And if animals like wolves or bears had removed Grier's body post-mortem from the hammock, why was it left undamaged? The police does not believe an animal attack was responsible, as there was no damage to the campsite, aside from torn clothing. Although there is still no clear explanation for the disappearance and death of Jordan Grier, the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office stated, "The exact cause of death could not be determined, but based on all the evidence recovered at the scene and family statements, foul play was not suspected. Unless additional evidence related to this investigation is uncovered, this investigation is now officially closed." The camp of Jordan Grier, in the northwestern part of the BCWA, close to the Canadian border, lies of course in a region long believed to be part of the territory of the Sasquatch, dating back to prehistoric times. The famous pictographs of Hegman Lake are less than 20 miles from where the Jordan Grier campsite was found. The natives of northern Minnesota and Ontario believe that the forests of the BWCA are indeed inhabited by beings that are hostile and extremely territorial. If Grier had accidentally entered such an area, he might have been attacked and killed. Algonquin mythology contains numerous stories of hunters or wanderers whose bodies were found with missing heads. The Algonquin also believe that the BWCA, and northern Minnesota in general, has been home to various Sasquatch clans since prehistoric times. The strange circumstances surrounding the death of Jordan Grier remain unsolved until today. It appears that Grier was attacked inside the hammock. But if Grier was killed by wolves or a bear, or had accidentally or intentionally taken his own life, and animals had removed his body post-mortem, why was the hammock still undamaged? If an animal had attacked Jordan Grier, why didn't he attempt to use his Beretta? According to the police, the gun had not been fired during the events leading to his death. And how is it possible that large parts of Grier's skeleton, including his skull, completely vanished, despite an extensive search with cadaver dogs at the site that lasted several weeks? Why were authorities, especially the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office, so quick to close the case on Jordan Grier's death? As mentioned earlier, St. Louis County is arguably the biggest hotspot for Bigfoot activity in Minnesota. Numerous videos and photos, allegedly showing Sasquatch, have been recorded in the wider area over the past decades. This video, for example, was recorded in 2011 by an elderly couple near the St. Croix River, north of the town of Stillwater in Minnesota. Also, several video clips allegedly showing Bigfoot from the neighboring Canadian province of Ontario exist. This clip was recorded in 2022 at a lake in northern Ontario. See the links in the video description for more Bigfoot encounter videos from the region.
Oh my God.
So, what is your opinion on Sasquatch in Minnesota and the strange disappearance of Jordan Grier in the Boundary Waters canoe area? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this episode of Bigfoot Territory. Subscribe to the Squatch Mafia channel at YouTube for more videos on Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Check out Squatch Mafia at Patreon and TikTok for extra content. Thank you for watching.